The crowd was the largest I had ever stood inside. Not just in terms of numbers, though there were tens of thousands of them, pressed shoulder to shoulder across the grand concourse of Velschen Station, the primary transit hub of the interstellar sovereignty's capital world. It was large in the way that certain crowds are large when every person inside them is holding their breath at the same time. When 60,000 beings are waiting for the same thing and the thing has not yet happened, the silence has a weight to it, a pressure. Like standing at the bottom of a deep, still ocean. I had been stationed at Post 7 for the past 6 hours. Post 7 was not glamorous. It was a pressure barrier position, essentially a velvet rope job with diplomatic pretension, set back 40 meters from the procession route where the imperial family of the sovereignty would pass. My assignment: observe, document, and stay out of the way. I was the only human at Post 7. I was, as far as I could tell, the only human within a quarter-kilometer radius in any direction. The United Earth Diplomatic Corps had sent exactly 3 observers to the imperial coronation procession. 2 were senior attaches who had been placed in the dignitary gallery, elevated and shielded and given cold beverages and cushioned seats. I was the junior observer. I got Post 7. I had been told this was an honor. I was choosing to believe it. My name is Callum Reyes. I am 31 years old, 6 feet tall, brown hair going prematurely silver at the temples, a habit of putting my hands in my pockets when I'm nervous, and a career trajectory that had brought me, through a series of improbable decisions and one deeply improbable job application, to the capital world of an interstellar empire on the most significant ceremonial day in its 400-year history. The sovereignty didn't have a lot of humans. We were recent additions to the diplomatic landscape. First contact had been less than 9 years ago, and the integration process had been, politely speaking, a work in progress. Most sovereignty citizens had never seen a human in person. Some had seen holographic records. Some had formed opinions based on those records. The opinions were, in my experience, a fascinating spectrum ranging from mildly curious to deeply skeptical to convinced. We were some kind of elaborate biological joke. The universe was playing on everyone. I had made my peace with being exotic. What I had not entirely made peace with was the particular social reality of standing at Post 7, while everyone around me was at least 7 feet tall, iridescent, and possessed of the graceful calm of beings who had been attending imperial processions since before my grandparents were born. The Velschen, the species that formed the ruling class of the sovereignty, were tall, slender in the way that willow trees are slender, which is to say, elegantly, improbably, in a way that suggests they might bend dramatically but would not break. Their skin held light differently than human skin, not glowing exactly, but retaining it, so that even in the dimness of the covered concourse, they seemed to carry a faint luminescence with them. Their hair, when they had it, which many did, tended towards silver or white or the deep blue-black of a winter sky at dusk. Their eyes were large, their features refined in ways that Earth art had been trying to achieve for millennia and never quite managed. They were beautiful in the way that old cathedrals are beautiful, structurally, intentionally, in a way that made you feel smaller without meaning to make you feel that way. I was doing my job, which was mostly watching and occasionally noting things in my diplomatic pad, when the procession began. You felt it before you heard it. A low harmonic, the sovereignty's ceremonial frequency, generated by instruments I had no name for, that resonated in the chest cavity rather than the ears. The crowd responded to it the way a field of grass responds to wind, a collective, unconscious lean toward the source. 60,000 beings adjusting their orientation by a few degrees without realizing they were doing it. Then the drums. Then the banners. Then the Imperial Guard, 40 of them, in their full ceremonial armor, which was not the practical armor of soldiers, but the theatrical armor of an empire that wanted you to understand exactly how serious it was about itself. tall as towers, silent as stone, moving in a formation so precise it looked choreographed, which it was, though calling the Imperial Guard's procession walk choreographed was like calling a river damp. The crowd did not cheer for the guard. It would have been inappropriate. You did not cheer for the blade of the sword. You waited for what the sword protected. I was watching the guard, trying to memorize their formation for my report, when I heard it. A sound entirely out of place with everything around it. Small feet running. Not the measured, dignified footfall of Veltian ceremony. Not the heavy boot strike of the guard. Running, the light, quick, slightly uneven impact of someone very small moving very fast and not entirely in control of either their speed or their direction. I turned toward the sound before I understood why. She came from the left side of the concourse, from somewhere behind the sealed dignitary barriers. I never learned exactly how she had gotten loose, and she was running with the absolute commitment of a small person who has decided that the situation calls for maximum velocity and minimum forethought. She was a child, 6 years old, maybe 7, small even by Veltian standards, which meant she came approximately to my mid-chest. Her hair was silver white and loose, streaming behind her as she ran. Her ceremonial robes, and they were ceremonial robes, formal and layered and embroidered in gold, were in a state of significant disarray. One layer trailing, the sash untied and flapping, a decoration of some kind caught in her hair at an angle that suggested a brief but intense encounter with something. Her eyes, when I caught them, were enormous even for a Veltian child. Wide and pale, the silver gray of a winter lake, and currently expressing the specific emotional combination of I have done something I was not supposed to do, and I am committed to continuing to do it. The crowd parted. This is the part I still think about, sometimes late at night, when I'm trying to understand that day. The crowd parted not because it was instructed to, not because the guard made it, but because 60,000 beings simultaneously registered the small silver streak running through their midst and stepped aside for her the way water steps aside for a stone. Instinct, deference, something older than ceremony. She was, I would learn later, the youngest daughter of the Empress, fourth in line to the sovereignty. Princess Veltian Corel Murath, 8 years old, I had underestimated slightly, known to the imperial household as Myra, and known to her older siblings as the small catastrophe that wears our mother's patience like a garment. She was running through a gap in the imperial procession, past the guard, past the chamberlains, past the senior ceremonial officials who were in the process of realizing what was happening and had not yet arrived at the stage of doing anything about it. And she was running, I realized, toward the crowd, toward the barrier line, toward Post 7, toward me. The 40 Imperial Guards had, by this point, registered the situation. You could tell because 40 of the most imposing beings I had ever been near simultaneously turned their heads in the same direction, which was my direction, with an expression that I can only describe as collectively, professionally alarmed. The chamberlains were moving. 2 of them, senior ones, stepping forward with the careful urgency of people who understand that running would be undignified, but that not getting there quickly would be worse. The crowd was utterly silent, and Princess Veltian Corel Murath, 8 years old, in her disordered ceremonial robes with her silver hair streaming behind her, ran straight past the barrier, straight past the 1-meter buffer zone, straight past every applicable protocol, and launched herself at me with the complete confidence of someone who had decided that this was the correct destination, and that any obstacles between herself and it were irrelevant. I caught her. I don't know what else I would have done. She was airborne. My arms came up because that is what arms do when something small and fast is coming at your chest at speed. And she landed against me with a thump and grabbed 2 fistfuls of my diplomatic jacket and pressed her face against my sternum and made a sound that I can only describe as hiding. The world stopped. 60,000 beings, 40 imperial guards, an unknown number of chamberlains and ceremonial officials and diplomatic observers, all of them looking at me. A junior Earth diplomat, standing at post 7, holding a member of the imperial family. I did not move. I did not speak. I could feel her heart beating, fast, rabbiting, the heartbeat of a child who has been doing something exciting and is now facing the consequences. And I could feel her grip on my jacket, which was firm in the way that small hands grip things when they are not planning on letting go. One of the Imperial guards took a step toward us. Myra's grip tightened. The guard stopped. This, I learned later, was also protocol. When a member of the Imperial family grips something with intention, you do not separate them from it. Not until the Empress or the senior chamberlain gives the specific release authorization. You wait. Even the guard waits. Even when the thing they have gripped is a human diplomatic observer at post 7 who looks, by his own admission, completely at a loss. I stood there and held the Imperial princess, and tried to look like this was fine. "You smell different," she said into my jacket. Her voice was small and clear, slightly muffled by the fabric. The translation earpiece I wore rendered it instantly. I was grateful for it in that moment, with a depth of feeling I had never previously applied to translation technology. "Different from what?" I asked. "Different from everyone." She tilted her head up to look at me. This close, her eyes were extraordinary, not just large but expressive, carrying a kind of unfiltered observation that very young children have before the world teaches them to moderate it. She was looking at me the way scientists look at something they haven't categorized yet. "Are you one of the new ones?" "The short ones." "I'm human," I said. "Yes." "I've seen pictures." She seemed to be taking inventory of my face with some thoroughness. "You have a lot of lines in your face." "Thank you," I said on autopilot. "It wasn't a bad thing," she said, with the slightly injured dignity of someone whose observation has been misinterpreted. "It's interesting. You look like the bark of the memory trees in the Eastern Garden." She tilted her head the other way. "That's a compliment. The memory trees are very old and very beautiful." "Then thank you," I said again, meaning it slightly more this time. Behind her, at a careful distance, the chamberlains had arrived and were doing nothing. This was, I would understand later, because the princess was clearly not distressed. She had chosen this position with some enthusiasm, and the protocol for separating an undistressed imperial child from a chosen anchor was considerably more delicate than the protocol for separating a distressed one. You had to wait for her to be ready, or you had to get the Empress. The Empress was, presumably, somewhere in the procession. The procession had stopped. "Why did you run?" I asked, because it seemed like the kind of question that might occupy us while the adults figured out what to do. She considered this with the seriousness it apparently deserved. "Because everyone was standing very still and being very careful," she said. And I thought, if everyone is being very still and very careful, then someone should be moving, because if nobody moves, then how do we know the world is still working? I thought about this. "That's a fairly sophisticated philosophical position," I said. "Chamberlain Varys says I give him headaches," she said, in the tone of someone reporting a fact rather than expressing regret about it. "He says it approximately every other day." I can see why. She seemed to find this acceptable. Her grip on my jacket did not loosen, but she shifted her weight, redistributing, settling in, which is the thing small children do when they have decided that a position is satisfactory and they intend to remain in it. "You didn't drop me," she said. "You didn't give me much warning," I said. "But no, I didn't drop you." "A lot of people would have stepped back," she said. "I've tried this before." She paused. "Not here in the garden with the visiting dignitaries. Most of them step back or they make a sound." She tilted her head. "You made a sound." I did make a sound, I admitted. But you caught me. But I caught you. She nodded as if this was the conclusion of an argument she had been making internally. Good, she said. I was hoping. The senior chamberlain, Varys, I assumed, given what she had said about headaches, arrived at approximately this point. He was tall even by Velshan standards, with the particular posture of someone who has spent decades being professionally unflappable and is currently being tested. He looked at me with an expression that contained within it apology, relief, assessment, and a faint, deeply suppressed despair. Your Imperial Highness, he said, to the top of the princess's silver head, the procession requires your presence. I know, she said without moving. The Empress will be wondering. Mother always knows where I am, she said. She says I have a presence that's difficult to misplace. She paused. I think she means it as a complaint, but I've decided to take it as a compliment. Varys looked at me. I looked at Varys. We shared a moment of pure mutual understanding that transcended species and culture. I don't know the release protocol, I said quietly. I don't want to do the wrong thing. You've done nothing wrong, he said, equally quietly. She initiated the contact. Under Imperial custom, the responsibility for transition rests with her. He paused. Or with Her Majesty. How far away is Her Majesty? He looked over his shoulder. Approaching, he said, 30 seconds perhaps. I looked down at the princess. She was looking up at me. Your mother is coming, I said. I know, she said. I heard Varys's heart rate change. This was, I would learn, a Velshan ability, a sensitivity to biological signals in those around them, particularly when those beings were under stress. Children were better at it than adults, usually, less filtered, more honest about what they perceived. Are you going to get in trouble? I asked. She considered this with genuine thoughtfulness. Probably, she said, but interesting trouble, I think, not the boring kind. She glanced at Varys, then back at me. The boring kind is when I move something in the archive and it takes 3 days to find it. The interesting kind is when something happens that nobody expected, and then people talk about it for a long time. She seemed satisfied by this taxonomy. I think this is the interesting kind. I think you're right, I said. She looked up at me for a long moment. Her eyes, those enormous, Silver Lake eyes, held something that I didn't have a word for, not in any language I spoke. Something very old and very young at the same time, the way certain pieces of music are sad and joyful simultaneously, and you can't separate the two. I wanted to see what you would do, she said. When you ran at me. When I needed you to catch me. She said it simply, with the simplicity of someone who has asked the only question they were actually asking. I wanted to see what you would do. I didn't say anything for a moment. I caught you, I said finally. Yes, she said, you did. The Empress arrived as Varys had predicted, 30 seconds later, with the silence that opens before great things the way water opens before a large, quiet ship. She was not hurrying. Velshan empresses do not hurry. But there was a quality to her movement that conveyed urgency without embodying it, the way a horizon conveys distance without moving. She was, and I register this not as attraction but as sheer aesthetic fact, extraordinary to look at. Taller than most, which was not insignificant among a species already given to height. Her ceremonial robes were immaculate in a way that Myra's were demonstrably not. Her hair was the deep blue-black of the winter sky shade I had noticed in the crowd. Her face was the face that the Velshan consider the standard of its type. Composed, clear-featured, holding the kind of calm that is not the absence of feeling but the absolute mastery of it. Her eyes went to her daughter first, then to me. She held my gaze for 3 full seconds, which is longer than it sounds when an empress is doing it. She is well, she asked. Completely, I said. She landed very confidently. Something crossed the empress's face that she immediately controlled. She has a habit, the empress said, of landing confidently in situations that have not consented to be landed in. I consented, I said without thinking. There was a silence. Myra made a small sound against my jacket that might have been a suppressed laugh. The Empress looked at me with a slightly different quality of attention, not less composed, but differently composed, as if she had been presented with a variable she had not included in her calculation and was adjusting in real time. "Your name," she said. It was not a question, but it was an invitation. "Callum Reyes," I said. "Junior Diplomatic Observer, United Earth Corps, Post 7. I paused. "Ma'am." "The human," she said. "One of 3, I said. "The other 2 are in the Dignitary Gallery." "They chose the Dignitary Gallery," she said. "I was assigned Post 7, I said. "And yet Post 7, she said, with an inflection I couldn't entirely read, appears to have been exactly correct." Myra looked up at her mother. Some communication passed between them that I was not party to, the particular language of parents and children that requires no words. The Empress's gaze softened by a fraction. Then she looked at me again. "You may set her down," she said, "when she is ready." "When she's ready," I agreed. Myra considered this for a moment. Then she uncurled her fists from my jacket slowly, deliberately, as if she was making a decision about each finger individually. She dropped to the ground with the careful grace of someone who has been practicing landings. She smoothed the front of her disordered robes. She looked up at me. "Thank you," she said, "for catching me." "Thank you," I said, "for choosing me to catch you." She looked at me with those Silver Lake eyes for one more long moment. Then she took her mother's hand. The Empress, and I marked this because I checked afterward with Varys and he confirmed it was unusual, gave my hand a brief, deliberate touch. Not a handshake, not a formal gesture, something smaller, an acknowledgement. Then she guided her daughter back toward the procession. 40 Imperial Guards, who had stood at rigid alert for the entirety of this episode, returned to their positions. The chamberlains reorganized. The procession resumed. I stood at Post 7 and watched it go. I wrote my report that night with the particular care of someone who understands they are documenting something that will be read very carefully by many people. I was precise. I included everything relevant. I noted the departure from protocol, the child's physical state, unharmed, energetic, apparently delighted with herself. My actions, reflex catch, stationary hold, no independent movement, and the resolution, orderly return to the procession, initiated by the child's own decision. I submitted the report at 2300 station time. At 23:15, I received a message. It was from the Imperial household, not Varys, not the Chamberlain staff. The seal was the direct personal correspondence seal of the Empress. "Observer Reyes, your report has been received. It is accurate in its particulars, though it omits one detail which I will record here for completeness. When my daughter chose her landing point, she had, by her own account, assessed 17 available targets in the immediate vicinity before selecting you. When I asked her why, she said, he looked like he was paying attention to the right things. I found this relevant. Her Majesty, Veltian Empress of the Interstellar Sovereignty, 4th of her line. P.S. The Diplomatic Corps has been notified that your posting has been upgraded. You are no longer assigned to Post 7. I didn't sleep well that night. This was not unusual for me on important days, and this had been an important day, and my mind kept replaying moments from it. The sound of small feet running, the weight of a child deciding to trust me, the Empress's hand on mine, brief and deliberate, like a sentence being punctuated. I was at breakfast the next morning, the station's human-accessible dining facility, which served approximately 40% of what I would actually want to eat but did so with genuine effort, when Varys found me. He looked somewhat less professionally unflappable than the day before, which is to say he looked like a man who had gotten 4 hours of sleep and was on his second stimulant beverage. "The princess has requested you," he said. I set down my fork. "Requested me for what?" I asked. "She has not specified," he said. "She rarely does. The specification in my experience becomes apparent upon arrival." He paused. "I would encourage punctuality. She becomes creative when she waits." The imperial garden was not what I had imagined, which I recognized was my failure of imagination rather than the garden's failure to be impressive. I had pictured formality, geometric hedges, ordered paths, the kind of garden that demonstrates power through precision. What I found instead was a space that seemed to have grown according to its own intentions, with paths that curved for reasons that became apparent only when you followed them, and trees that were the largest living things I had ever stood beneath. The memory trees, she had compared me to them. They were enormous, silver-barked, deeply ridged with the texture of old wisdom. I understood now what she had meant, standing under them. They were beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they have had centuries to become what they are. Myra was in one. Not at the base. In it, approximately 4 meters up, seated in a natural crook between two massive branches, wearing considerably more comfortable clothing than the ceremonial robes of the day before, reading something from a flat tablet. Varys made a sound that was not quite a sigh and was not quite a prayer. "Your Imperial Highness," he said, "Observer Reyes has arrived." She looked down. "I know," she said. "I heard you at the gate." She set down her tablet. "Can you climb?" I looked up at her. I looked at the tree. I looked at Varys. Varys's expression said, "I cannot help you with this." "Probably," I said. "These branches are more accessible than they look." "Yes," she said. "That's why I like this one." She scooted along the branch to make space. "There's a good spot here." I climbed the memory tree. It was, if I'm being honest, not particularly difficult. The bark gave excellent grip. The branch arrangement was genuinely good. I am not a natural climber, but I have enough basic physical competence to get 4 meters off the ground when properly motivated, and the princess watching me with the evaluative patience of someone conducting a competency assessment was adequately motivating. I settled into the spot she had indicated. The branch was wide enough to sit comfortably. The view from 4 meters up was the garden in its full strange beauty, the paths curving away in directions that made no Euclidean sense, the other trees enormous and patient all around us. Below, Varys positioned himself at the base of the tree, with the air of a man accepting his fate. "You came," Myra said. "You invited me," I said. "Some people don't come when I invite them," she said. "They send a message saying they appreciate the invitation and will attend at a later, mutually convenient time." She paused. "There is never a later, mutually convenient time." "I came now," I said. "Yes," she said. She looked at me with that evaluative quality she had shown the day before, the scientific observation, the unhurried assessment. "I wanted to ask you something." "Ask," I said. "When I ran at you," she said, "were you afraid?" I thought about this honestly. "Not afraid," I said. "Surprised and then committed. Once you were airborne, there wasn't a question. I was catching you. There wasn't a version where I didn't." She considered this. "My tutors say that humans have slower reflexes than Velshan," she said, "but that you compensate with, they use a word I had to look up, tenacity. The tendency to not let go of something once you've committed to it." "That's probably accurate," I said. "I looked up more things about humans after yesterday," she said. She said it with the particular lack of embarrassment of someone who has decided that curiosity is a virtue and sees no reason to be modest about practicing it. "Your planet has a lot of different peoples in it, and you're all very small, relatively speaking. And you've only had interstellar contact for 9 years, and most of the sovereignty doesn't know what to do with you yet." "Also probably accurate," I said. I think, she said carefully, that the sovereignty is sometimes bad at knowing what to do with things it hasn't seen before. She looked out over the garden. I'm studying statecraft. Chamberlain Varys says it's premature. Mother says it's appropriate. I think Mother is right, but I understand why Varys says it. He's worried I'll draw conclusions too fast. She paused. I might draw conclusions too fast sometimes. What conclusion did you draw about humans? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. The garden moved around us, a faint wind through the memory trees, the sound of something somewhere in the distance that might have been water. That you pay attention to the right things, she said. The same as yesterday. She glanced at me sideways. Most of the dignitaries in the concourse yesterday were watching the procession, the banners, the guard, the ceremonial spectacle. She paused. You were watching the crowd. I blinked. Was I said. Yes, she said. I watched you for 6 minutes before I ran. You were looking at the people, not the procession, the people. She tilted her head. I thought that one will catch me, not because he's fast. Because he's watching. I sat with this for a moment. That's a fairly sophisticated observation, I said, for someone who also climbs trees to avoid chamberlains. The two things are not in conflict, she said with dignity. No, I agreed, they're not. We sat in the tree together for a while after that, not talking. The garden made its quiet noises around us. Below, Varys produced a small pad from somewhere and began reviewing something with the air of a man who has learned to bring his work to tree-climbing situations. My mother wants to meet you, Myra said eventually. Formally, not like yesterday. I would be honored, I said. She doesn't do formal meetings unless she means them, Myra said. She has people for the meetings that are obligations. When she meets someone herself, she means it. She paused. She met you herself yesterday, even though it was irregular. I didn't say anything. She looked at you the way she looks at things she's deciding about, Myra said. Not things she's already decided, things she's still in the process of. She looked at me with those Silver Lake eyes. I think she's deciding something about you. About me specifically, I said, or about humans in general. Myra considered this seriously, as she considered most things. I think, she said, both. And I think she thinks those might be the same question. The formal meeting was 3 days later, in a room in the imperial residence that was neither as grand as I had feared nor as intimate as I had hoped. It occupied a middle territory, significant furniture, significant art, significant views, but scaled for conversation rather than ceremony. The Empress received me alone, which Varys had indicated quietly was not common. She was different without the procession around her. The same, still extraordinary, still composed, still holding that quality of absolute mastery over her own presentation, but less framed, more immediate, like a painting scene without the gallery around it. Observer raise, she said. Your Majesty, I said. We sat. Tea was served, a Veltian variety that tasted like if fog had decided to have a flavor, which I had been warned about and was prepared to appreciate diplomatically. It was actually quite pleasant once you adjusted your expectations. My daughter speaks highly of you, the Empress said. Your daughter speaks very directly, I said. I find it refreshing. Something moved in the Empress's eyes. She is not always appreciated for it, she said. Her directness is considered by some members of the court to be premature, a quality she will grow out of, they hope. She paused. I do not share this hope. She sees things clearly, I said. That seems like a quality worth keeping. The Empress looked at me with the same quality of attention Myra had inherited. Evaluative, unhurried, genuinely interested. She told me what she observed about you, the Empress said, in the concourse, that you were watching the people rather than the spectacle. I was doing my job, I said. Documentation of atmosphere, crowd response, social dynamics. That's what a diplomatic observer is there for. And yet, she said, of the 18 observers stationed in the concourse, you were the only one Myra identified as watching the crowd rather than the procession. She paused. I checked. I didn't know what to say to that. The others were watching what they were supposed to watch, she said. The spectacular thing, the planned thing. You were watching the unplanned things, the people. She set down her tea. I have been empress for 11 years. I have met a great many diplomats. Most of them watch the spectacular thing. The spectacular thing, I said carefully, is designed to be watched. It's designed to tell you a specific story about the sovereignty. I paused. The crowd tells you a different story, the one that isn't designed. The empress was quiet for a moment. What story did the crowd tell you? She asked. That they love her, I said. Not the imperial office, not the sovereignty as an institution, her. You could see it in how they moved. Not deference, reverence. There's a difference. I stopped, aware that I was perhaps being unusually direct with an empress. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, she said quietly. Continue. Deference is positional, I said. You give it because of what someone represents. Reverence is personal. You give it because of who someone is. I looked at her steadily. The crowd yesterday, their reverence for you was personal. That's not common, not at that scale. The empress was quiet for a long moment. That, she said, is the first time anyone has said that to me directly. She looked at her tea. There are reports, of course, statistical analyses of crowd response, favorability indicators, but not, she paused, not that. I'm just a junior observer, I said. I might be wrong. You might be, she said, but I don't think you are. She looked at me again. My daughter said you would catch her. She was right. And I think she may be right about other things as well. There was a quality to the room that had shifted slightly the way light shifts when clouds move. Not dramatic, not sudden, just different, a different quality of what was happening between us. The diplomatic corps has assigned you a new posting, the empress said. I'm told you'll be attached to the cultural exchange program, working with the historical archive. I received the notice, I said. I haven't started yet. The archive, she said, is housed in the eastern section of the imperial grounds. You'll pass through the garden regularly. She paused. The garden with the memory trees. The memory trees, I said. Myra has claimed a particular one, she said, forth from the eastern path. She's been in it most mornings since she could climb. A pause. She'll likely continue to be there. I looked at the empress. She looked at me. I look forward to the work, I said. The archive sounds remarkable. It is, she said. 400 years of sovereignty history, fully catalogued. She almost smiled. Though I suspect the most interesting material in the Eastern Garden will not be in the archive itself. The weeks that followed are harder to describe than the day that started them, because they were made of smaller things. Mornings in the archive, where the history of the sovereignty unfurled in texts and recordings, and objects that I was one of the first humans to study formally. Afternoons that often found me in the garden, where Myra had declared the fourth memory tree her personal territory and had extended visiting rights to me, Varys, under protest, and a small selection of garden creatures she had befriended through what appeared to be sheer force of personality. She talked about statecraft. She talked about history. She asked questions about Earth with the relentless curiosity of a mind that genuinely wanted to know things and had not yet learned to pretend otherwise. She wanted to know about weather patterns and architecture and what it felt like to live on a world with a single moon. She wanted to know why humans had so many languages. She wanted to know about music. I told her about rain, about the smell of it before it arrived, the sound of it on different surfaces, the way a city sounds different wet than dry. She listened with her eyes wide and her tablet ready, taking notes. I didn't know then that the empress sometimes walked in the garden in the late afternoons. I didn't know at first that these walks were not random. I learned over time that they were not. She found me there one evening, the Empress, alone, which was less unusual than I would have expected. She had, Varys told me, a habit of walking without escort when the garden was secured, standing under the memory trees and looking up through the branches at the first stars coming out. "What do you see?" she asked. "I'm trying to identify constellations," I said. "I know the Earth's sky. This one is still new." "There's a sovereignty navigation system," she said. "The court astronomers can provide you with charts." "I know," I said. "I have the charts, but charts and knowing are different things." I glanced at her. I like to learn things by looking at them for a while before I read about them. Otherwise, I see the words instead of the thing. She stood beside me and looked up. "We call that one Murath's Reach," she said, indicating a configuration I had been studying. "The long arm of stars to the north." "Murath," I said, "Myra's name." "Her full name is Velishan Coral Murath," she said. "The stars were named first. I chose her name because I wanted her to always be able to find herself in the sky." A pause. "My mother told me that a person who can find themselves in the sky is never truly lost." I looked at the stars for a while. "That's a beautiful reason to name someone," I said. "She ran to you," the Empress said quietly. "Out of everyone in the concourse, out of everyone in the sovereignty, on the most significant day of my reign in front of 60,000 witnesses, she ran to the one human who was there." She was quiet for a moment. "I have thought about this a great deal." "Have you reached a conclusion?" I asked. "Several," she said. She was looking at the stars, not at me, and her profile in the fading light was the kind of sight that you store somewhere careful. "She said you paid attention to the right things. I have tested this observation in the weeks since, and I find it accurate." She paused. "You pay attention to the right things," observer rays, "the undesigned things, the unspectacular things, the things that tell you what's actually happening rather than what's meant to appear to be happening." "It's a professional habit," I said. "No," she said gently, "it's a character quality. The profession selected for it, perhaps, but it isn't the source." She looked at me then. "Where does it come from?" I thought about this. "My mother," I said, "she had a saying, 'Watch what people do when they think no one important is watching.' She said that was when you saw who someone actually was." I paused. She applied it to herself too. She was very consistent about that. "She sounds remarkable," the Empress said. "She was," I said. A small silence. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. The directness of it, unpadded, was Velshan in a way that Myra had also, and that I had come to recognize as genuine. "She'd have been fascinated by all this," I said. "She would have had 1,000 questions." "Tell me one of them," she said. I thought. "She would have asked," I said slowly, "what it feels like, being Empress, not the responsibility of it or the history of it or the institutional weight of it, what it actually feels like. She was interested in the interior experience of things, what it is to be inside a life." The Empress was quiet for a long moment. "No one has asked me that," she said. "I'm asking it," I said, "on her behalf." The stars came out properly then, the way they do when the last of the day lets go. Murath's Reach stretched across the northern sky, the long arm of stars, and the Empress, beside me under the memory trees, was quiet for a moment in the way that people are quiet when they are deciding to tell the truth. "It feels," she said carefully, "like being the largest landmark in a landscape. Everyone navigates by you. Everyone uses you to know where they are. But you can't navigate by yourself because you're the fixed point. You're not moving, so you have no direction." A pause. "I've been Empress for 11 years. I know exactly where everyone else is. I am less certain sometimes of where I am." I looked at her. She was not looking at the stars anymore. "You're in the garden," I said, "under the memory trees, with a very junior diplomat who climbs trees with your daughter and doesn't know all the constellations yet." Something moved in her face. Not a smile exactly, more like the precursor to one. The moment just before where the possibility is visible. So I am, she said. The sovereignty, in its 400 years, had not had a precedent for what was developing. This was, Varys informed me, both a challenge and an opportunity, because the sovereignty's legal infrastructure was extraordinarily good at precedent and extraordinarily thoughtful when precedent didn't exist. It was not opposed to new things. It was simply very careful about them, which was not the same thing. My position in the cultural exchange program was extended, then made permanent provisionally, then made permanent in a way that stopped being provisional. Myra grew 2 centimeters over the fall season and announced this to me from the 4th memory tree with great satisfaction. She was working on a statecraft paper about the integration of new species into existing interstellar frameworks and had asked me to read the draft, which I had, and which was remarkable in its clarity and slightly terrifying in its conclusions, which were largely correct. You've recommended a complete restructuring of the diplomatic residency framework, I said. Yes, she said. That's going to make some people very uncomfortable. Yes, she said. I know, I wrote a section about that too. Do you want to read it? I read it. It was, if anything, clearer than the first part. You're going to be extraordinary, I told her. She accepted this with the composure of someone who has been told this before and has decided to take it as a working hypothesis rather than a compliment. I know, she said, but I have to become it first. Varys says the gap between potential and achievement is called work. Varys is right, I said. He usually is, she said. That's what makes him exhausting. The evening I remember most clearly, though there are many evenings, accumulated now like the rings of a memory tree, each one a year recorded in the living wood, is the one at the end of the first year. The Empress and I had walked the garden path that evening, the long one that curves through the memory trees and comes out at the reflecting pool, where the sovereignty stars hang doubled in still water. We had talked about many things, and some things we had not talked about yet. At the pool we stopped. Callum, she said. She had been using my name for some months, which Varys had quietly informed me was not incidental. Yes, I said. I want to tell you something, she said. I want to say it directly, not through implication or protocol or the way that the court communicates things it considers significant but delicate. She paused. Myra says I should just say things. She says it's faster and cleaner and that people generally appreciate it. She's right, I said. In 11 years, the Empress said, I have not met someone who I believe sees the world the same way I see it. Not precisely the same, you are human and I am Veltian and our histories are 400 years apart. But the direction of the sight, the angle of it, she looked at me steadily. You watch the undesigned things. You ask what it feels like to be inside a life. You climbed a tree because a child invited you. She paused. I find that I have been watching you for a year with the same attention you gave the crowd in the concourse, and I have been drawing conclusions. What conclusions? I asked. That I would very much like to keep watching, she said, for as long as you are willing to be watched. The pool reflected the stars. Murath's reach lay across the northern sky. I thought about small feet running, about a weight landing against my chest, about Silver Lake eyes asking the only question they were actually asking. I wanted to see what you would do. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Good, she said, and this time the precursor resolved into the actual thing. She smiled. And I thought, this is where I am. This is my fixed point, and from here we both have a direction. The coronation procession happens every 5 years in the sovereignty, not a coronation as such, but a renewal ceremony, the Empress walking the grand concourse again, the crowd assembled, the occasion marked. The second time I witnessed it, I was not at post 7. I was in the dignitary gallery. I won't describe where I was exactly, or in what capacity, or what that meant for the formal protocol of a very formal empire in the process of deciding what to do with the first human who had ever been placed in that gallery. That story will unfold in its own time. What I will describe is what I watched from that elevated position. 60,000 beings, the same harmonic in the chest, the same drums, the same banners, the same imperial guard. And behind the guard, walking with the gravity and grace of someone who has spent 5 years growing into herself, Myra, taller now, her silver hair formally arranged, her ceremonial robes immaculate in a way that suggested she had finally made her peace with the sash, taking her place in the procession for the first time as an acknowledged member of the ceremony, rather than a small catastrophe who had escaped from somewhere. She found me in the gallery, from 40 meters away, through 60,000 beings, in the elevated dignitary gallery. She found me, and she grinned, quick, unguarded, the grin of a child who has not lost the best parts of being a child. And then she composed her face back into ceremonial dignity and looked forward. I grinned back. I don't know if she saw it. I think she did. And the Empress, walking ahead, beautiful and composed and carrying the weight of an empire with the grace of long practice. The Empress, who does not look for things when she is in the procession, who keeps her eyes forward, who is the fixed point everyone else navigates by, glanced just briefly, just for a fraction of a second, toward the dignitary gallery, toward my position, and then looked forward again. That was enough. That was more than enough. Outside, the sovereignty stars were waiting. Among them, Mureth's reach stretched across the northern sky, the long arm of stars that tells you where you are, so you're never truly lost. I knew exactly where I was. And word count, words. Estimated runtime, tilde 63-64 minutes at 160 WPM. Channel Alien Girl. Engine, CF blend. Accidental bond plus royalty discovers humanity. Energy families, 3+6, found family warmth plus reverent awe. Appearance tier, moderate. Stream, wholesome / romantic adult blend.